All right, I'm glad to be here. Brought a few things. How many of you are relatives of the Giant or Bad John? Well, I'm going to give you a piece of paper, and as I'm talking, if that triggers a story in your mind, write that story down and put your name and contact information, email or phone, and I'll call you and talk to you about it later. That's how I learn more about these characters. By the way, next October, a year from now, the family's going to have a big reunion. There'll be a lot of storytellers and folks coming together to share everything they know about the folks. There's a poster that was a circus poster after they got married, and here's a boot print of the Giant and a hand print, and that one is his ring, and these are caricatures of how tall he was and how tall his wife was. So let me start out by saying that it's a pleasure to visit here at the University of Louisville, and I just want to be treated like any other basketball player you're recruiting. Other than that, I want to tell you about some Letcher County gold. I want to tell you about the Giant, but I want to tell you about the Giant in the voice of his nephew, Bad John Wright. So let's go back, if you can go back in your mind to the early 1900s. Bad John's still alive. He's living over in Pound, and he's going to tell you this story because he wants you to know about his uncle. So I'll start out by saying I'm glad to be here. My name is, by birth, is John Wesley Wright. Behind my back they call me Bad John or Devil John. But a lot of people think that I've done a lot in my life that I should maybe shine away from or be proud of, one or the other. They think because I sired 31 children that that's a big deal. They think because I fought on both sides during the Civil War that that's a big deal. They think that because I started out being born in a log house on a farm in Letcher County and ended up a millionaire, that that's a big deal. But I'm here to tell you that the most impressive man I've ever met in my life was my uncle, my big uncle, named after President of the United States, Martin Van Buren Bates, was 7'9". I've chopped his head off back there, so it's hard to tell exactly how tall he was. And he was married to a woman who was 7'11". Now he made her promise to always wear flats. He didn't want her in any high heels. He didn't want a woman to be that much above him, above his raisin or above him, either one. But this is Baby Bates as a youngin'. He didn't really get started growing until he was age 7, but then he grew for the next 22 years without stopping. I imagine, you're a nurse, I imagine he had stretch pains all the time when he was going through all that, because babies just do. When babies get aggravated, it's usually because they're going through a little growth spurt. So you can imagine going from that to 7'11", there had to be some pain, no gain. But you can also tell by the way he's dressed that his family was more than average. They had the money. He was the last of 12 kids. All the parents and the other children were normal size, and until he started growing when he was 7, he was normal size. But a couple of things happened when he was 7. His father, John, passed away and left the farm and all the children to Sarah, the mother. And they're farming out here where the school is on, 805. where 805 runs into the Kentucky River. Martha Jane, yeah, that was the farm, that land right in there. He came back in 1904 and sold that land to the Potter family. But they had a place to live. They could fish and hunt. They raised hogs, they raised cattle, they raised goats. They had all kinds of crops and so forth. So they might have been poor, but they didn't know they were poor. I've looked at the county records and come on.
Edison and Kate. Is there a Kate? Is it a steak sandwich?
I got a
Steak and fries?
yeah.
Yeah, enjoy, sorry.
No problem. They didn't know they were poor, but looking back at the county records, the Hogg family were the richest people in the county, and they probably still are. But this family of 12 with 2 adults managed to eke out a living, and besides the crops, they also traded for land. So John, the father, was a pretty active land trader. But then when he died, Sarah, the mother, had to figure out what in the world to do with this child who all of a sudden was now growing. None of the other kids had started growing like that, and her husband had always been around to find out about it. So she didn't know what to do. She came into Whitesburg, which is about 12 miles from where they were growing up out there. There was one doctor in town. There were 50 people in Whitesburg. There was a courthouse and the jail. There was an attorney, one doctor, a shop, 3 shops where they did blacksmith thing, made tools and fixed tools and that sort of thing, and a couple of churches. And that was it. So she went to the doctor, asked the doctor what she should do, and he said he'd read about, studied some on giants, but he'd never seen one. He didn't know what to do, and his best advice was to go home and give the kid lots of sassafras tea. That's what they gave everybody for everything back in those days. Well, it didn't help. By the time he was 13, he was man-sized, and she was afraid to let him do anything. She said she was afraid he'd pop. He was so big like a balloon, he was just full, and if she worked him hard, or he played hard, or he fell down, he'd pop. So she wouldn't let him do that. But what they found out was that he was real keen. His mind was as sharp as a razor. You give him a name, a date, sum to add up or subtract, an event in history, and you give it to him one time and he had it. So she decided that he would be the scholar in the family. He would get his grades, and he would get all the grades for the kids above him and below him, and he would be their tutor, and he would teach them at home. School lasted 4.5 months back in those days, so they gave him plenty of time for hunting and fishing and all the things that they wanted to do. And so he went, when he wasn't tutoring, he was taking care of the other kids. Now this is Martin Van Buren, who he was named after. Martin Van Buren was about 5'2" and from Vermont, and a real pipsqueak, but he had been Andrew Jackson's vice president and one of his few supporters left at the end of his term. And so John Bates liked that man, and so he named his son after his supporter. Now, I don't know how to blow that picture up, but this is John, and this is Sarah. Actually, I take that back. These are my parents. This is Joel Wright, one of the giant's brothers, and this is his wife, Agnes Bates. So they married. That's how I came to be. And now it says loading. Well, it's not loading forward or backward. Bates clan grew, and Sarah had all the children, and now the giant is the tutor for these kids, and he did really well at it. As I said, he had almost a photographic memory, and so when he taught them something, when he saw something once, he had it, and when he passed it on to them, they retained it real well. And so she was trying to figure out how she could take care of him over her lifetime, or beyond her lifetime. How was he going to make a living after she was gone? So some friends told her about Emory and Henry College on the other side of the mountains over in Virginia. It measures about 58 miles as the crow flies, but she sent him off with a pack on his back and told him headed southeast, and when he got there, to tell him that he was a student and to enroll and come back when he could teach. So he did that, and he came back a year later, passed the teaching exam for the county, and became the teacher at the school out near where the farm was. What do they call that? They call that that little community, 4 letters. Coma, yeah, call that Coma. And so he's in a one-room schoolhouse. He's got all these children. He's got his brothers and sisters. He's got me, and he's got my brothers and sisters, and a bunch of other kids that lived up and down the river. And we all minded him. Listen, if you're that tall, no one wants to find out how hard you can paddle and be the first one. So everybody minded him, and the only time he'd get excited was if a kid took off and ran away. He'd track him down and bring him back, but he never did paddle anybody. So he enjoyed that. Now, teaching year, 4.5 months, lots of hunting, lots of fishing. It was a good life. He had a job that would last his lifetime. His mother was happy. He could do something productive, and she didn't have to worry about how he was going to feed himself after she was gone. So he taught for about 6 years at Kona, and the more he taught, the better he got at it. But then something happened to change everything. What do you think it was? Yeah, a preacher named Ben Cottle from here in Whitesburg came around, and he told him that the people up north of Kentucky had elected a man named Abraham Lincoln as president, and the people down south with plantations and slaves were afraid that they would lose their way of life. So Ben Cottle recruited about 1,000 people here in Letcher and over in Wise County to form Company F of the Confederate Army. They called him Cottle's Army. That's what we all called them around here. They trained over here on a piece of land off of the bypass that Ben Cottle's father owned. They trained, they marched, they finally got these fancy gray uniforms, and they looked real slick. They'd go around town and show them off. And Cottle had foreseen that the war would last about a year. So he signed everybody up on a 1-year enrollment. So he signed them up, they marched, they got their uniforms, and they headed out, and they got in a few skirmishes. They got in a battle over near Cumberland Falls, and the giant took a shot in the shoulder, survived that. They went up to Mount Sterling, fought up there. They fought at over around Prestonsburg, and they fought at the Second Battle of Cynthiana. All during that time, he had a couple of horses shot out from under him. You'd think he'd be an easy target, being so tall, but he was spry, and he could run like the wind, and he managed to escape, except for that shot at Cumberland Falls. He escaped getting hit all during that first year of the war. Now he did run into a problem. At the end of that first year, the captain here in Whitesburg had been captured, and the men just quit and gave up. Most of them just turned around and came home because their enlistment was up. But the giant decided that we were going to go off and fight in Virginia. So originally, he signed up, and 4 of his brothers signed up here in Whitesburg. They fought for a year, and when that year was up, he wanted to fight some more. I had to stay home because I was too young, but a year later I'm okay, and he grabs me and off we go over into Virginia. So we sign up for a brigade in Virginia, and we fight in places like Saltville and Wytheville and Abington and Wise. So we got plenty of licks in, and those uniforms didn't look nearly as good the second year that they'd been worn. We didn't have much ammunition, we didn't have much uniforms, we didn't have much food, but we were soldiers. So we're going down one day. The commanding officer, our commanding officer, says, we're going to take about half of you guys and we're going over to Piketon, which is now Pikeville. So we're going over there because we hear there's a lot of Kentuckians that are dissatisfied with the Yankees and they might sign up with us, the Confederates. So we go over there and we camp near downtown Piketon, and the Yankees hear about it from Ashland, and they decide they're going to run us out of there. Well, most of those boys were from that area. They had hunted and fished through there. They knew every stone and twist and turn in the road. So they came down at night and came through the woods, and they came upon us the very first thing in the morning. They started firing at us. We got up. It was before coffee or before a latrine. It was early, and we fired all the shells that we had, and then we didn't have any more. So we had to surrender. Now, as they were getting about 70 of them surrendered, I saw my chance and took off out the side door and headed up the mountain. So I was able to watch what was going to happen next. They took those 70 men and they loaded them on horses, and they were going to drive them to the train in Catlettsburg. And once they were on the train, they would go to Camp Chase up near Columbus, Ohio, to be in war prison. Well, they got everybody loaded, and they looked around, and there's Martin, all 7'9" of him. There wasn't a horse left that could handle Martin. So they commandeered a boat in Piketon, and they took that boat from Piketon all the way up to Catlettsburg. And I'm watching from the hillside, and I see this stuff. They set Martin down in the middle of the deck. They put people around him with rifles aimed at him, and they put a noose around his neck and just let him sit there in that hot sun. They had him, but they didn't want any part of him. In fact, the Yankees used to say that Martin was as tall as 5 men and fought like 50. And none of them wanted to find out if that was true. So here he is. He's not going anywhere. And they're heading up this small river, pushing their way up. And their commanding officer decides to sit down. He'd been an attorney, and he decided to sit down and talk to Martin and just see what a giant had to say. Well, you know, Martin had taught school for 6 years. He knew a lot about history. He knew a lot about what was going on in the world. And he was a pretty glib fella. So the commanding officer decided by the time they got up to Catlettsburg that he liked this guy. That he wasn't an ogre. He wasn't a monster. He was a pretty intelligent fellow. So they get him up there. They put him on the train. They head him off to Camp Chase. And the commanding officer goes ahead and he starts doing paperwork for a prisoner exchange, prisoner of war exchange. Martin goes on from Camp Chase to Point Lookout in Maryland to spend the rest of the war as a war prisoner. But in comes this paperwork, and he actually spends just 33 days as a prisoner of war, and then he's exchanged out and gets to come home to Kentucky. Now, part of the deal was that he would lay down his arms and not take them back up again. That didn't work. He got his arms and everybody else's. Martin's guns, by the way, he wore 2 of them like this. The bullets like this, and the pistols were 71 calibers, made especially for him in Philadelphia. His sword was 13 inches longer than regulation. Never used it, but he had it. But the shells, those guns, he did use those, and he shot plenty of them. So he comes back home, and by this time, I'm fighting for the blues. It's funny how when there's a gun pointed at your head and you're given a choice of dying or being a Yankee looks pretty good. So at the end of the war, he's fighting for the Rebs and I'm fighting for the blues. And when the war's finally over, we both end up coming home to Letcher County. We came back to plow the farm for the spring feed, to raise the spring crops. And as we looked around, we'd seen where Army went this way, Army went that way, and Army went this way. There wasn't a side of bacon, there wasn't a biscuit, there wasn't a green bean left on our place. So we knew it would be a long time before that crop came up and fed anybody. So we decided the 2 of us would take off and leave the rest of the land for the family, and hopefully they could make it and feed each other. We didn't know what we were going to do, but we headed north. We went to Cincinnati. And we're walking along. Now you can just imagine me walking along with a man who's 7 feet tall, and we're walking down the streets of Cincinnati, and this fella comes up to us and he asks us what we were doing. And we said we were looking for work. And he said, what do you do? We said, well, we just got out of the war. We don't know what we do. What can we do? And this fellow was with a circus, the Beloit Circus. And he says, I'll tell you what. He said, I've got a job for you guys. He said, you especially, pointing to Martin. So we got hired the first time that he saw us. Martin was the new tallest man in the world, and I was a horseback rider and a sharpshooter. And we never lived that good. They kept us up nice. They put our picture up all over town. People would come to see us perform. I think I got the worst of the deal. They only paid me $100 a month. I take that back. They only paid me $50 a month. And I had to feed that horse. I had to take care of it. I had to ride it frontwards, backwards, upside down, hanging on, and I had to shoot at a target at the same time. And I had to hit the target, or else they'd get rid of me. So I did that for $50 a month. Martin put on a suit, and he just commenced to talking. He'd tell stories about being tall. He'd tell myths about giants that he'd studied on. He'd talk about growing up on the farm. He'd talk about war, and he'd talk about teaching school. And people liked it. So they liked it so much that another circus, the Robinson Circus, came along a couple months later, and they offered us more money to do the same thing. We didn't even know we were doing it right the first time. But they were a bigger outfit. They traveled further. They saw how big the crowds were that came to see us. And they offered Martin $400 a month, and they offered me $100 a month to go with them. So off we went. Now you got to realize that the average guy in that time period was making $8 or $10 a month. That was it. And here Martin was making $400 a month. He kept his money in a bag of diamonds. Somewhere along the line, he decided he didn't trust banks. He didn't want to carry gold around; it was too heavy. Diamonds were just about right. So he had a bag, and that was where all his wealth was. Well, we commenced to enjoying that life for a couple of years, And it got to me where I was thinking, there's got to be a little bit more than this. There's got to be a little bit more to life than this. They treat us nice, they pay us good, people applaud, and it's great. But there's something missing. So I talked to Martin about it, and he said he knew how I felt, and he asked me what I was going to do. And I said, well, when we were fighting the Second Battle of Cynthiana, he said, I said, by then I was a blue shirt, and one of you all shot me in the leg, left me to die out in the field. And that night, I crawled inch by inch to the nearest barn that I could get to. And when I got there, I just collapsed. And whenever I woke up, I don't know how many days it was, but whenever I woke up, there was a farmer and his daughter there. And the farmer had pulled that bullet out of my leg. And his daughter, Maddie, was there to change my dressing and to feed me. And she did that for well over a week, maybe 2 weeks. I kind of lost track. But she did that for long enough for me to get well again and go find my troops. So I was thinking, I told Martin, I was thinking that anybody that was that nice to me for that long sure would be a wonderful person to spend a lifetime with. And I was going to go back to Cynthiana and see if she was still there. It had been a few years, I didn't know, but that's what I was going to do. And he said, John, if I had someone waiting on me, I'd go too. He said, I know what you're missing, I know what you're wanting. And he said, you're not going to find it here. He said, you made some money here, you've got enough to live on for a while, so go on and see what you can find out. So off I went. And I felt sorry for Martin because, he was a giant, he was a great guy, he was my uncle, he was smart as a tack, but, where was he going to find a woman? And don't you know that another circus man comes along and he's decided that he wants to take a tour to Europe. So they're leaving from New Jersey on a boat, and he signed Martin up, and he signed some other acts up, and Martin goes down there and gets on board the City of Brussels. That was the name of the ship, and it was pulling out the same day that he got there. He gets on that ship, they pull out, it's 10 days they get to England, and he looks around, usually looking down like this. He looks around, and he sees somebody about here. And what do you know? On that same ship, hired by the same circus, is Anna Swan. Anna's from Nova Scotia, Canada. She can sing, she can play the piano, she's as smart as Martin is. And on that 10-day cruise, what do you think happened?
They fell in love.
They fell in love. They sure did. Where are you going to find somebody else that size? So they get to England and they announce that they have fallen in love and they want to get married. And you're so smart, what happens next?
Then they got married and they had children.
Well, almost and almost. The circus promoter knows a good deal when he sees one. So he announces when they get there, that he's got two giants, they're going to get married, and he invites all the doctors and all the press people that want to come to a reception to come and meet them, ask them questions, write stories about them and so forth, hoping to fan the flames of interest to draw people to their shows. And he does that. And one of the people that's reading these newspaper reports is Queen Victoria, Her Royal Highness. Queen Victoria is so interested that she orders them to come to the palace in London. So here's Martin, born on a farm in a log house in eastern Kentucky, and now he's going to Buckingham Palace. Think about it. Think about how weird that is. Think about how strange that is. And he's taking his 8-foot wife with him. It gets stranger. So they get to Buckingham Palace. The Queen decides that she likes them so much that she gives them some presents. She doesn't want to be forgotten. She finds out more about the wedding, and she announces that she's going to host the wedding. The wedding is going to be at Trafalgar Square in the city of Westminster, inside London proper. It's an old Anglican church that goes back to Roman days. It's always been there, and it's always been open. So she arranges for a preacher from Nova Scotia to be the pastor during the wedding, and she offers to buy Anna's wedding dress. It takes 100 yards of white and yellow cloth and another 50 yards of lace. Now, one of the things Anna used to do, by the way, is she would, in her part of the show, she would come out and she would take a tape measure and she'd put it around her waist. Then she'd invite ladies from the crowd to come up, and it would take, that amount of tape would go around 3 women in the audience. She was about 350 pounds, 7'11". She's still listed as the tallest woman in the world by Guinness. They are still listed as the tallest married couple in the world by Guinness. And they toured, the contract was to tour Europe for 3 years. So they're there, they tour Europe. They do get married. They go for a 4-day honeymoon, and they have a reception back in London, and they meet the Prince of Wales. They meet royalty from Russia and Norway and other places in Europe. And these people are just knocked off their socks by these people who are so intelligent and so full of life and so forth. So they toured for 3 years. They finally decided to come home, and they're visiting friends in Ohio, up around where Akron is now, and they liked the lay of the land, so they took some of those diamonds. She was getting $400 a month too, and so was he. So they took some of those diamonds and they bought 130 acres and created a farm up there. They made the walls of the house and the barn 14 feet tall. The doors were 8.5 feet tall. The door handle was 5 feet off the floor. And all the furniture was made to their specs, to their sizes. And they just loved to laugh when people would come who were small and had to climb up into the chairs and so forth, because that was what they were used to that. But people liked to go visit them. She had a pet monkey. She kept on a chain, and it ran a line. So when you went into the house, you had to get past the monkey. He had a parrot inside. And when you went in and you said anything to the parrot, he'd say, "Get off my land." Martin had taught him to say that. And if that didn't bother you, then he had this big snake, one of those boa constrictors, and it had free reign of the house. These are circus people. So they knew what they liked what they knew. And as far as children, she's still the only giantess to birth 2 children. They both died within a day. They're all married. They're buried near their farm up in Ohio. But when she died at 42, he had a 10-foot high statue chiseled of her out of marble in Italy. Put it on a 10-foot pedestal, and there's a 18-foot monument to her there, along with her sister's. Her sister died visiting them, and one of the children. The other child is in England, and they gave that body to science. But at the bottom of that monument, he had these words placed there from Psalms 12. It says, "As for me, I will behold thy face in righteousness. I shall be satisfied when I awake with thy likeness." So he's saying that even though she's gone, having that memory, that likeness is all that he needed. So he lived until he was 92. He did remarry again 12 years later, but he's buried there right beside her. So as John Wesley Wright, let me just tell you that there's somebody out there for everybody. You might think you're too tall, or you're too short, or you're too fat, or you're too skinny. You might think lots of things. But now I can tell you, based on my uncle and aunt, that there's somebody out there for everybody. And when I got back to Cynthiana, my woman was there too. We got married and we lived a long, happy marriage right here in these mountains. Maddie was her name. Thank you very much.